BSc 1A. So 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 I report Introduction to Philippines History, historiography. Long ago, the Philippines was an empire ruled by a group of heroic individuals who went made to build their fortification, which they dubbed the, primor, the primordial Maharikans. They cover, wait there. They cover a number of war, but it all comes down to one that they failed to win. So this is one of the things I accumulate over the course of my academic career, particular during my introduction to the subject of history in secondary and post-secondary school. But who are the people we want to win over as absolute historian in the Philippines? Is there a major history in the Philippines? So, is there anything we need to learn about his history? Question that we must keep in mind in order to assist the next generation and preserving the Philippines history of Philippines. Philippines history of the Philippines. Those who are the researching for the truth and for the matter of perceiving the primitive life and primitive circumstance of the Philippines are intellectual giant in history. According to what I learned, history is the most important was of establishing in alignment for us in the future, and it is well perceived by those who dedicate themselves to preserving what we already have. I learned that our history in the Philippines has played a hug role in shaping our collective perception, which has led to the development of a student obligation to promote and reflect on the past to us absolute history begin and to the following generation absolute history and neither flawless and imperfect. It is simple balance between the two. One of the most important lessons I learned from studying subject history is that regardless of how justified or subjective a specific history is, there must be an equal balance of accuracy and comprehension. Is it necessary for us to finish studying history? Yes, yes. Most active we have deficiencies and lapses, and these are among them, in my opinion, a deficit to us in our journeys to study history. We must not conform to dispute it, but to learn it is one of the most important thing to accumulate in history as your mature. So that's that. So ito na lang ang nasabtan ako sa introduction of Philippines history. Grabe. Proceed to sa isa. So Philippines Island history. I derive some conclusion in various part of Antonio de Morga articles. Based on my careful analysis of his deception of the early occupants of the then now Philippines island, with which I agree. There are a lot of black folk in the region. He claims both men and women have small stature and shaggy hair, yet they are robust and enduring. This is a tribute of barbarians with few resources. In reality, they are friendly and process deserves it as skill. They live a basic extent. Yes, they have their own way for discerning vegetables. Sweet potatoes and bananas are among the crop they cultivate. They engage in bayanihan, in which they assist one another upon planning, harvesting, and constructing their homes. Their favorite hobby is talip, a community dance perform which native guitar, This dance presents their daily life as well as the creature that surround them. They have the ability to live as well. The estates are still considered to be among the world's best survivalists. This capacity was not overlooked by the US military. He also mentioned in his article that the Indian behave with more savagery and folly in religion affair than in any other. Because in addition to being pagans with no understanding of the true God, they have made no effort to seek Him, no relation, and had no firm belief in Him. The devil usually, usually explored a thousand fault and blindness to deceive people. They were scared to him and tremble his presence because he come to them in a variety to troubling and terrifying shape as well as the land monster. So they adore him and drew several different portraits of him. Filipinos believe in an invisible parallel spirit world, world that influence the visible world. According to Valentina II Filipinos, according niya kay believe believe in spirit which include anything from higher creator gods to lower spirit that ruled over nature things like trees, rock, and stream. Third, Filipinos thought that the act and the world of this spirit creature had an impact on human affair. So see, Anito were ancestor spirit, nature spirit, and deities in personality Philippines. Tradition, animistic faiths. A man, how there is an amount of money provided to his wife is given to the wife as token of her husband. Devotion and respect. Muslims and the Philippines continue to perform this custom. So, proceed ta sa isa. The Manunggol Dar. The Manunggol Dar exemplified the Filipino people creativity and sense of artistry. It was created by brilliant potter. It was also recognized as an item that showed the function of water source such as ocean lake and river as method of transit, commerce, and communication throughout the region for further time. So, two people picture sailing a boat position on top of the jars covered caught my eye on the boat in the human image are supposed to represent two souls on a journey to the hereafter. I believe the Manunggol jar is hundred of year old if it was discovered in the late 1960s and date using the new stone age. The Manunggol jar is Manunggol art is an abjural art excavated from a Neolithic burial site at the Tabon Caves, Manunggol Caves at Lipuon Point in Palawan, Philippines. The Manunggol jar reveals that people in the past were talented and adept of craft, and the work always meant something and had a meaning for them. It recounts how ghosts travel to the next life of bird ship across river ocean. This object in opinion is from the past because there is a lot of information about and it was also declared as a craft from a long time ago. So, pasita sa isa. So, Laguna Copper Plate. In 1986, the Laguna Copper Plate inscription was discovered on a sheet of copper metal contained ancient lettering and in the province of Laguna. So in the history of the Philippines, it is the earliest known trace of writing literature and literature. We know little about the Philippines previous to the Spanish conquest outside of writing story. Only a few objects with writing on them had been unearthed in the Philippines aside from a few record kept in China that name the island. So the Laguna Copper plate inscription is the name of an inscription writing on the artifact that is extremely important for understanding the history of the Philippines during the 10th century. And many academics truth the region was isolated from the rest of Southern Asia. This relic was discovered in the Lumang River in the province of Laguna while digging using a mechanical conveyor. The Laguna copper plate inscription was translated in 1990 by Anton Postma, a Dutch scholar in ancient Philippines script and Mangyan writing who had lived in the Philippines for many years. Who have lived in the Philippines for many years. Finally, the literary style caught my attention in Java at the time, figure which impressed into hot copper while the character on the Laguna plate appeared to be hammered and called copper. So during the examination, post revealed that the inscription was about a deep owned by a man named Namwara. So name niya na tao, so name ato na tao is Namwara, whose obligations were forgiven after the chief of Tondo granted him a pardon. One cat, one kati and 8 suwarna, or about 926.4 gram of gold was his obligation. So, proceed ta sa isa. So, duties of Katipunan. Our national hero raised their life for the country's independence and the establishment of the freedom and the republic. They were subjected to abuse and suffering as a result of colonial control in many countries across the continent. It was the mistreatment that led to the Katipunan being fabricated and exchanged as a student in Filipinos patriot. I believe that the Katipunan's responsibilities is there a Filipinos parties out of it, but what are the things that need to be preserved so that future generation will be aware of the Filipinos history, suffering, and how they achieve massive freedom? So, is it still necessary to research that Katipunan in Katipunero's history? How can we prevent the next generation from learning history? We need to put so we need to put prevent the next generation I sorry. So we need to put together a list of questions in order to grant various level of dexterity and comprehension about the primitive heroes. So in our book as well as in our imagination, our former heroes still exist. They have representative here represented heroes as well as Filipino who sacrifice their lives for freedom and independence using their private and strategic advancement to eliminate their foes and put them to the map. So the Katipuneris mission is to firm construct them on a bulwark of power, strength, and intelligence. They keep their word and use their dexterity and skill to accomplish in and exterminate any intruders outside our borders, those preserving Philippine soil. So we can't enjoy freedom without the Katipunan's duties and principle, and we can't success as a republic without them disturbing colonial power. So finally, the Katipuners are responsible for the freedom of the Philippines and the soul's independence. They make a hug contribution to the republic message. They make republic message establishment. The focus of their task to obtain is to get to the bottom of their objective. Their participation was evidence. So, kanilang nasabtan ako sa kanilang gibuhat morning sabtan na ako sa topic sir. So, proceed to sa isa. So, 16th century Philippines materials. Filipino before the Spanish conquest are not the same as Filipinos afterward. So this demonstrates that we had developed our own way of life even before the Spanish arrived in the Philippines. The Filipinos produced proceeds of our empire, but due to colonialism by other countries, our understanding of pre-colonial Filipinos has been shed and has all but vanished. So we may follow the life of pre-colonial Filipinos throughout history and compare and countries how fair, were advanced and matured. So I feel that each Filipino has a distinct personal, which is why our culture and manner of life change throughout time. If everything that appeared to be incorrect and unjust in the past is corrected or changed. Early Filipinos' characteristic habit, costume, and way of life only serve to emphasize how rich and simple the original Filipino culture was. So, strategy has been shown in the topic just as it occurred to the first five people of Sulu. Muna tong Sulu yun, itong a few years later, itong nasa Sulu. They spent all of their attempt just to escape the war, but once they arrived on this underflying island, they needed to find some food to satisfy their hunger. So, itong pag-away yun sa Sulu, nangita sila paraan para makaon o para po makaiwas sa gutom or para napaisulod ang ilang mga tiyan. So, nangita sila paraan para makaon lang. They mostly search for all those populate land. However, while looking for those land, they run out of food. So they must find some strategies for them to eat. Land they are run out of food. So they must find some strategy for it. So bisa ko sa diskarte nila para makaon sila or para masulod silang tiyan. So nangita sila strategy para makakaon. So wala akong nabalance sa 16th century Philippines materials. So, proceed sa isa. So, 16th, 18th century Philippines. In the 16th and 18th century, the Philippines simply displayed how literature flourished and was clear in our country's early years. Our ancient literature illustrate our daily routine and tradition through book tales, antique plays, and short novels. So, pasensya na. Hindi kayo nakaya, okay? Even before the Spanish arrived, we established that we had a rich and beautiful literature. It merely goes to show how our study to get their names known in the literature. Literature has become entwined in many various elements of modern life, and it has been branded as having the ability to progress international by the evolving culture. However, where the snake are indigenous culture, they were able to keep their eating heritage intact because they adhere to a tradition way of life and did not succumb to the cultural influence of Western colonialism. So proceed to sa isa. So, 19th century Philippines. The 19th century is known as the age of enlightenment. Yeah. Yet it is also known as one of the worst period in the Philippines history. So, kaning 19th century is no age of Eden, yet it also known as one of the period. So, pinakauna na period in the Philippines history, Spanish governed the Philippines for a long period and persecute Filipinos. Were being subjective to a lot of misery and deprivation. Injustice, social and racial reduce and exploit incoming system and unionist church and government corruption are all commonplace. So we can't even fight for our right in court because there is enough space, and we can't even express ourselves because we'll be penalized if we do. Filipinos are seen as self and false with no right to own land, talk freely, although significant sum of money and tax are collected. The promised reform to the Filipino people have yet to be achieved. Officials in charge of keeping the peace and order abuse their power and inflict violence on their people. Floral grading into vicious we people who are supposed to be able to all is only available to those at the top of the social hierarchy. People weren't helped during their reign. In our colorful history, the 19th century is a securing era. Yes, because recalling the past is hard, we should not bear or forget. It is also a piece of history that reminds our that remind us of Rizal and other propaganda's hard effort to recapture our rightful home. So, proceed to sa last. So, Philippines Revolution. In 1896, the Philippines Revolution began as a military battle between Filipinos and the Spanish colonial administration in the Philippines. So, katong revolution began military o Spanish kuro to. Nag The Filipinos were fed up with the Spanish hegemony over them. The Katipunan was created to fight the Spaniard of freedom. So, kaning Katipunan, gusto sila Katipunan, gilabanan nila ang Spanish para sa ilahang freedom. So, pa sila ilain na mabuhat kundi labanan nila. Kaya kung di nila labanan po to, sila po ang kawawa. The Katipunan leader as well as everyone else involved in the revolution. So, kaning Katipunan leader as well as everyone else involved. So, tanan sila na involved. Kaning tao diri sa Katipunan, kaning Katipunan, example, Katipunan ka, so pwede ka musabak ana, pwede ka mapil sa ila. Ma-involved ka sa ila kay ang leader man ang nag-ingon na lalaki na Katipunan, pwede mo laban or pwede ko nila para malaban dito. Para sa freedom. We will aware of the perils of being captured, which include this and the loss of a chance of freedom. So, we're well aware of perils of being captured, which included and the loss of a chance of freedom. So, katong laban nila, na-loss sila, so kanang na-defeat sila ba? So, wala sila matawag karon na chance. So, wala sila chance karon para makuha sa freedom. Example kanang, kuan yun, na-defeat sila. So, kuha chance sila para sa ilang freedom. The only ways to achieve freedom was via war and murder. Independence from Spain was achieved. So, mali dito pag-explain ako kanina. So, kaniday, the only way to achieve freedom was via war and murder. Independence from Spain was achieved. So, kaya na lang ang paraan nila para ma-achieve nila ang freedom. So, kaya nilang mupatay sa war or mo kuan kanang kaya nila pat yun ang kalaban or para matagan silang freedom. Filipinos band together to overthrow the Spanish rule after a long and brutal conflict that appeared to endure an eternity. The Biak na Bato Accord was signed on December 15, 1897. The treaty put end into the Philippines Revolution for the time being. Even though it was a perfect settlement for either side. Filipino took a terrible but necessary move to obtain independence from Spain during the Philippines Revolution. Since I was a child, I've been fascinated by my four words. I could understand why so many Tagalog words were utilized in Spanish. My curious about my forebear was PQ, and I was inspired to explore more. Because the country is so deserved with different people having different questions like others. The Philippines Revolution was then taught to us in one of social studies classes. I learned how Spain had conquered in Philippines for hundreds of years and how the Filipinos native had grown tired of their oppressive rule. So, because it was such a short section, I only learned a little. It was at this point that I realized I wanted to learn. The United States and Spain, however, did not accept the statement because the Spanish government had given the Philippines to the United States in consideration for an indemnity for Spanish expenses and assets lost in 1898 Treaty of Paris. As a result, conflict, campaign for independence, and colonization tensions between the Philippines and the American administrative excess, which were compounded by Aguinaldo's feeling of betrayal. Their concerns were reinforced by the treaties of part which have the Philippines to the United States. Aguinaldo commanded his force to battle the Americans for this reason. Aguinaldo longed for complete independence for them. So, nakailan na to si Aguinaldo tungod sa iyang kaisog or sa iyang kakuha, siya ang nag-lead para labanan ang mga American sa una. So naitawag Independence Day. So mo nang tawag si Aguinaldo na hero. Siya man din nag-lead sa una tong paglaban sa Amerika. So that's all. Thank you. Thank you, sir.